Bom dia. Bom
Bom,
dia a todos, bom dia a todas. É uma alegria muito grande para nós estarmos aqui. Finalmente chegamos nesse dia tão esperado, que é o 5º encontro de professores de inglês para crianças e o 4º seminário de avaliação de línguas estrangeiras para crianças. Nós estamos extremamente felizes. Em nome do Grupo Felite, queremos dar as boas-vindas a todos e todas. Eu, professora Juliana Tonelli, da Universidade Estadual de Londrina, líder do Grupo Felite, grupo de pesquisa do CNPq, e minha querida amiga e colega de profissão, professora Cláudia Kawashi Furlan, da Universidade Federal do Espírito Santo, que é vice-líder do grupo de pesquisa Felite. Bom dia, Cláudia.
bom dia, Juliana. Bom dia, pessoal que está aí acompanhando a gente. Estamos começando mais um EPIC com muita alegria. Muito bom estar aqui com todos vocês.
Bom, nós queremos então dar início. Eu vou ler aqui, né, algumas umas palavras para vocês se sentirem acolhidos. Nós estamos realmente muito felizes. Para nós foi um desafio, né, Cláudia, preparar esse evento. Nós começamos há 6 meses, pode parecer que não, mas é um evento preparado com muito carinho. E nessa edição do EPIC, então, desde 2013, quando nasceu o EPIC, esse encontro ele vem reunindo professores e professoras. Acho que meu microfone deu uma travadinha aqui. Voltou? Voltou? Esse encontro vem, então, reunindo professores e professoras de inglês para crianças. Nós temos preparado esse encontro no desejo, na perspectiva de que realmente seja um espaço de construção de saberes, de trocas. É um encontro já na sua 5ª edição, o Encontro de Professores de Inglês para Crianças, e o 4º seminário. Para quem não sabe, o EPIC ele nasceu em 2013, aqui na Universidade Estadual de Londrina, e ele tem sido, então, um evento bianual. Algumas pessoas, às vezes, nos pedem para a gente fazer anualmente, mas confessamos que nós não teríamos forças para tanto. É um evento que exige muita preparação, mas é feito com muito carinho. Desde 2013, então, nós viemos nos reunindo, e esse ano, por conta da pandemia, infelizmente, nós não pudemos recebê-los aqui na UEL, recebê-las aqui em Londrina, mas, como temos feito, né, Cláudia, ao longo de todo o ano passado e esse ano, o grupo tem realizado os encontros que nós chamamos de Conversando em Casa. Então, esse ano, nós fizemos o EPIC em Casa. Esse encontro, como eu falei, né, ele tem o objetivo maior de poder congregar, de ser um espaço de troca. Nós sabemos que a área de ensino de inglês para crianças é uma área que vem crescendo substancialmente no Brasil, mas nós sabemos que ainda carecemos não só de pesquisas, mas também de espaços de formação e principalmente dessa comunidade, né, de troca, que possa, então, fazer essas conexões. E é esse um dos objetivos do encontro. Nós estaremos, então, reunidos ao longo, né, desse finalzinho de mês de setembro e ao longo de todo o mês de outubro. Nós pedimos que vocês confiram a programação do evento, né? Nós decidimos não congregar todo o evento em um final de semana, como geralmente nós fazíamos, né, no presencial, porque nós entendemos que seria bastante cansativo. Então, a programação, para quem teve a oportunidade de dar uma olhada, ela está recheada de novidades, inclusive com palestrantes do exterior. 2 das palestras nós teremos hoje, e a nossa palestrante que falará um pouquinho sobre avaliação na palestra de encerramento também é uma convidada do exterior. Então, nós pedimos que vocês confiram a programação no site do evento. Lá vocês encontram todos os links de acesso, aqueles que vão apresentar trabalhos também, podem acessar os links das salas, os dias, os horários e toda a programação. E antes de eu passar novamente a palavra à Cláudia, nós queríamos lembrar aos apresentadores e apresentadoras de trabalho que nós teremos os anais do evento. Então, os anais, eles são uma oportunidade para publicar o trabalho que vocês vão apresentar. Somente lembrando que só podem publicar, então, trabalhos aqueles que efetivamente apresentaram no evento. Claudinha, fica à vontade, quer falar alguma coisa?
Obrigada, Juliana. Não, quero só dar as boas-vindas novamente para todo mundo, para quem está chegando agora. Novamente falar que é uma alegria mesmo poder receber vocês, poder participar. Infelizmente, a gente não pode estar presencialmente em Londrina, né, para a gente poder ter um contato mais próximo, mas a gente também pode estar aqui em casa, né, como a gente está chamando aí, o nosso EPIC em casa, nós tivemos os Conversando em Casa, então é muito bom a gente poder estar em casa e poder aprender, discutir, refletir, então tenho certeza que vai ser um evento muito bom para todo mundo, a programação está maravilhosa, a gente tem muita coisa diferente, muita coisa acontecendo, então eu espero que todo mundo aproveite e participe bastante, tá? Então é isso que eu queria falar.
Bom dia, pessoal. A professora Juliana está com um pequeno probleminha de conexão, então às vezes trava, mas está tudo bem.
Acho que eu voltei, né? Cláudia, você faz um teste com o seu microfone, por favor? Eu não estava te ouvindo.
Você não estava ouvindo?
Não, agora eu ouço.
Agora foi?
Foi.
Então tá bom.
Então tá bom. Antes, nós queremos então agora convidar a professora Arelis para estar conosco.
Bom dia a todos e a todas. Primeiramente, sou muito grata pelo convite, por poder prestigiar esse evento de uma forma breve, mas com muita alegria. Primeiramente, pelo reconhecimento ao trabalho de vocês, pela relevância das pesquisas que são desenvolvidas nesse contexto, né? Então, o Departamento de Letras Estrangeiras Modernas, o qual eu represento aqui, fica muito feliz, está muito satisfeito em dizer que a professora Juliana é nossa docente da Universidade Estadual de Londrina. Agradecemos imensamente por desenvolver este tipo de trabalho, o qual exige, né, na minha visão, uma preparação muito grande, uma sensibilidade extraordinária. Então, agradeço muito por todas as pesquisas, pelos trabalhos, pela inspiração que esse trabalho promove, tanto na comunidade interna, quanto na comunidade externa. Então, gostaria muito de agradecer pelo convite, dar as boas-vindas a vocês e dizer que sim, as crianças são a esperança do mundo. A gente aprende em Cuba que elas são a nossa possibilidade de melhorarmos o futuro. Então, esse investimento de tempo, de energia, de afetividade, de criatividade, essa sensibilidade toda, como vocês dizem, de inovação, de cumplicidade, que o evento promove, é uma iniciativa louvável, de destaque, e pela qual todos nós somos gratos, porque vocês plantam sementes que um dia brotarão e permanecerão, ainda que nós não estejamos. Então, é uma semente que brotará e dará bons frutos. Eu acredito nisso e agradeço pela convite e dou as boas-vindas a todos e a todas. Obrigada.
Obrigada, professora Arelis. A professora Arelis, ela é docente do curso de Letras Espanhol na Universidade Estadual de Londrina e, atualmente, ela é chefe do Departamento de Letras Estrangeiras Modernas, departamento ao qual eu pertenço, e que, portanto, né, esse evento é um evento do Departamento de Letras Estrangeiras Modernas. Muito obrigada, professora Arelis, pela sua presença, pelas suas palavras. Eu acho que significa muito para nós, né, Cláudia, enquanto grupo. Às vezes a gente pensa que é uma iniciativa de pessoas ou de um grupo, e né, não deixa de ser, mas é um grupo de pessoas que estão ligadas a instituições de renome, como é o caso da Universidade Estadual de Londrina e da Universidade Federal do Espírito Santo, representada aqui pela professora Cláudia. Então, nós agradecemos imensamente a Arelis pela sua presença num sábado de manhã. Para quem não sabe, gente, a Arelis tem uma filha linda, maravilhosa, chamada Antonella. A Arelis está grávida, né, Arelis? Agora vem aí um meninão, né?
Sim, vem o nosso Vitório para completar a alegria. Por isso que eu digo, são sementes, né, que vocês já plantam. Eu já estou de olho nos projetos, né?
Por favor.
Como uma mãe preocupada, a Antônia, ela já tem acesso a livros bilíngues, né, para nós estimularmos a aprendizagem da língua inglesa, primeiramente, né, e também, né, a língua espanhola, porque é minha língua materna. Então, é uma satisfação poder estar nesse contexto de tantos frutos bons, de tanto conhecimento sendo produzido, e a principal coisa, a humanidade, né, a humanização do ensino, essa preocupação que eu sempre conheci na professora Juliana, com quem eu convivo mais de perto, professora Cláudia, né, então eu a conheço, né, como amiga, como colega, então tenho visto e compartilhado, né, experiências de dizer, meu Deus, Arelis, eu ando no corredor com as crianças de mãos dadas, eu as levo até a sala de aula. Então, quando a gente faz a abertura de um evento, né, parece tão formal, mas como é pique em casa, né? Nós podemos destacar até essas iniciativas, né? De pegar as crianças, né? Levá-las até a sala de aula, dizer para os pais, estão seguras, elas estão aprendendo, né? Então, quando a gente está no mundo acadêmico, às vezes pensa nos resultados de uma pesquisa, mas há muitas coisas há muitas flores que vão deixando perfume ao longo do caminho, né? Então, são essas experiências que vão tocando, sensibilizando, né, muito além da escrita de resultados de trabalhos de pesquisa, além do contexto de trabalho, né, são experiências e possibilidades que vão se abrindo e que vão tocando as pessoas de formas diferentes. Então, se essas pesquisas com crianças, né, estão no início, aqui no Brasil, no começo, ou ainda precisa ser feita muita coisa, graças a vocês, que estão dedicados, né, a trabalharem com elas, a se preocuparem como elas aprendem, como devem ser avaliadas e como que elas poderão dar continuidade nesse contexto de ensino e aprendizagem de línguas estrangeiras. Meus parabéns.
Obrigada, Arelis. Bom, agora nós queremos convidar a professora doutora Viviane Baggio Furtoso, a nossa diretora do Centro de Letras e Ciências Humanas da Universidade Estadual de Londrina, que também é nossa amiga, colega de curso, é docente no curso de Letras em Inglês e atualmente, então, está nesse desafio de ser a diretora do Centro de Letras e Ciências Humanas da UEL, onde fica o Departamento de Letras. Viviane, muito obrigada por ter aceito o convite de estar aqui conosco. E fique à vontade, querida. A casa é sua, você está literalmente em casa.
Então, tá bom, Ju, muito obrigada. Bom dia a todos e todas, né? Cumprimento aqui essa mesa de abertura, professora Areli, chefe do departamento LEM, professora Juliana Tonelli e professora Cláudia Furlan, coordenadoras, né, geral deste evento. E, em nome delas, eu cumprimento a todos e todas, a toda a comissão organizadora deste grande evento, né, em casa, um grande evento. Já queria dizer que eu adorei a logo, assim, maravilhosa, parabéns, linda, linda, acho que representa muito, né, e não é só o visual, eu acho que eu estou olhando para ela aqui, né, na tela, quando eu olho para ela, parece que acolhe, né, é um conforto, assim, é o em casa acolhido, né, de acolhimento. Então, já deixo aqui os parabéns. não só pela logo, mas por todo o evento, por toda essa organização maravilhosa. Estando neste lugar agora, como a professora Juliana colocou, né, como diretora do Centro de Letras e Ciências Humanas, queria muito estar recebendo todos e todas vocês aqui não, né, que eu estou na minha casa, mas lá também é minha casa, no Centro de Letras e Ciências Humanas. Então, para quem conhece a UEL, um campus lindo, né? Para quem não conhece, fica o convite, quando pudermos, venha nos visitar, conheça o nosso campus, esteja conosco, mas também o fato de não podermos estar agora presencialmente no campus, também é uma grande possibilidade de chegar em outras casas, né, Juliana e Cláudia? Então, desejo aqui que estejamos e que este grande evento esteja chegando em várias casas, em vários estados, no nosso Brasil, em vários países, né? Então, como a professora Arelis colocou, eu destaquei aqui, Arelis, da sua fala, você falou da humanização do ensino, né? Então, acho que para nós que estamos no Centro de Letras e Ciências Humanas, este é um grande ponto a ser pensado, a ser refletido. Então, eu destaco o grande trabalho, né, do Grupo Felite, de todos os envolvidos, docentes, discentes, dos alunos que estão lá, né, também recebendo todo esse estudo com carinho, com amor, mas também com muita dedicação acadêmica, científica, né? Então, um estudo que avança, um estudo que cresce e que acolhe essas crianças com todo esse amor, com todo esse lado humano, mas também com todo o respeito, né, que eles merecem do ponto de vista acadêmico e científico do trabalho que a gente entrega para eles na sala de aula. Então, eu fico muito honrada de estar aqui como diretora hoje, porque desde o começo da pandemia, né, uma das primeiras ações, eu não consigo dizer agora se foi a primeira, porque eu não vou me lembrar de cabeça, né, tantas coisas aconteceram, é um ano e pouco, mas um ano e pouco com uma dimensão gigantesca para todos nós, pelo trabalho, né, e pelos desafios que temos enfrentado até hoje. Mas, se não foi a primeira, foi uma das primeiras atividades, né, que destacou o Centro de Letras e Ciências Humanas durante a pandemia, que foi a contação de histórias, né, que vocês organizaram, que o Grupo Felite proporcionou. Então, queria destacar isso, que é um grande orgulho, né, de divulgar. Então, cada vez que eu recebia alguma coisa do Grupo Felite, então, imediatamente eu já colocava em todos os nossos grupos, né? O primeiro grupo era o grupo que nós temos com a reitoria. Então, nós somos 9 diretores de centro, na UEL são 9 centros de estudos, né? O Centro de Ciências Biológicas, Exatas, né? E no qual nós fazemos parte, que é o de Letras e Ciências Humanas, e ali era o primeiro lugar que eu colocava. Por quê? Porque ali era o nosso centro, né, em destaque. Todos nós fazemos isso, não só eu do CLCH, mas todos os diretores fazem isso. Ali é o primeiro lugar que a gente divulga as nossas ações, porque, olha, é o centro dentro da UEL se destacando. Então, se a gente destaca o centro, então, se a gente destaca um projeto de um departamento, de um centro, é a UEL que está ali no palco, vamos dizer, né? E isso é muito gratificante para todos nós. É o retorno que nós esperamos, né? Nós não fazemos ciência para que ela fique apenas na academia. A nossa ciência precisa chegar à sociedade, ela precisa chegar à comunidade. E eu acho que vocês, do Grupo Felite, fazem um trabalho maravilhoso e fazem isso chegar até a sociedade, né? Fazem todos esses resultados de pesquisa se concretizarem nessas ações que chegam até a nossa comunidade. Então, como diretora do CLCH, eu registro aqui a minha honra de estar participando deste momento. Não somos nós que vocês vieram aqui, né, para assistir, para ouvir, mas eu queria deixar aqui um abraço muito grande, né, um abraço virtual neste momento, dar os parabéns mais uma vez à organização do evento, e como docente do Departamento de Letras Estrangeiras Modernas, agora mudando um pouquinho o chapéu, dizer que é uma honra para mim fazer parte desse departamento, né? Isso acontece, às vezes a gente faz abertura de evento que não é do nosso departamento, mas neste momento eu sou do departamento, então eu também me sinto aqui muito confortável de externalizar essa minha honra, né, e esse meu orgulho do trabalho que a professora Juliana Tonelli, junto com toda a sua equipe, faz e que muito nos honra no departamento. Bem, então, o 5º EPIC é o primeiro virtual, né, Cláudia e Juliana, Então, assim, vocês estão fazendo tudo muito lindo, né? O site, gente, olha, é tudo, assim, com um cuidado, né? Que essa audiência, que esse público que está aqui, que vai acompanhar esse evento merece. E essa ideia de não fazer tudo blocado, Juliana, eu achei muito legal, né? Porque a gente anda um pouco cansado também da tela, né? Dessas questões. Então, um evento que começa hoje, 25/9, vai até 30/10, né? Passando pelas semanas, também achei muito oportuno, né? Muito oportuna essa organização da forma do evento de vocês. E sem contar que é o 4º seminário de avaliação, né, gente? Avaliação, qual eu participei lá do primeiro, né? Ju, fazendo parte também com fala, que é a minha área de pesquisa, né, que é a menina dos meus olhos na área da pesquisa, então muito gratificante para mim também ver vocês avançando nessa área que precisamos tanto ainda, estamos quase nem engatinhando ainda, né? A área de avaliação tem muito pouca coisa produzida no Brasil, na área de crianças, então, muito menos, e eu acho que vocês estão marcando, né, com esses eventos, com os trabalhos de vocês, um grande avanço, uma grande contribuição para essa área. Então, sem mais delongas, né, queria agradecer a oportunidade, deixar o meu registro às nossas convidadas do exterior também, né, as convidadas especiais, aí um grande abraço e sucesso no evento. Vou ficar aqui com vocês, vou assistir e vou participar do máximo que eu conseguir. Um grande abraço a todos e todas, desejo um ótimo evento e sejam todos e todas bem-vindos e bem-vindas mais uma vez à Casa do EPIC, à Casa do CLCH, à Casa da UEL. Um grande abraço.
Muito obrigada, professora Viviane, obrigada, professora Arelis, pelas palavras, muito bom, acho que, assim, já deram o tom do evento, né, já mostraram para a gente como é que vai ser esse evento, agradeço em nome do grupo, né, em nome da comissão organizadora, em nome do Grupo Felite também, muito obrigada mesmo pela presença de vocês, pelas palavras, e realmente a gente está bastante animadas, né, com esse evento, com esse formato, tenho certeza que vai ser muito bom para todo mundo, obrigada mesmo. Novamente, ressaltando essa alegria de poder fazer esse evento, e o nosso objetivo é realmente a gente poder pensar em questões que sejam mais humanas e que considerem as nossas crianças, né? A gente precisa falar sobre formação docente, a gente precisa falar sobre avaliação, a gente precisa falar sobre diretrizes, sobre políticas públicas, são muitos temas, são muitos tópicos que a gente precisa abordar, e eu acho que o EPIC tenho certeza, que o EPIC é uma oportunidade para a gente poder fazer isso, para a gente poder conversar, para a gente dialogar e para a gente propor encaminhamentos, né? Eu lembro que, aproveito para fazer essa lembrança, que foi em 2017, em um EPIC que a gente fez um manifesto, que a gente iniciou um manifesto e que a gente ainda está batalhando em cima desse manifesto, a gente teve conversa com a LAB, estamos ainda, e com muitas conversas, em algumas instâncias, pedindo, ainda continuando com esse manifesto, mas assim, eu estou lembrando isso porque foi de um EPIC, né, então, são desses encontros que a gente continua pensando no que a gente ainda precisa fazer, para a gente pensar nos próximos passos, o que a gente, enfim, são muitos desafios, como vocês colocaram, mas a gente fica aí com muito ânimo para continuar, né, nessa área, né, então agradeço. Tá? Muito obrigado. Bom, eu não sei se a gente tem mais algum recadinho para a gente poder passar, que a gente quer enfatizar aqui, tá? Dos anais, acho que a gente já falou. Gabi, você queria colocar alguma coisa?
Isso, temos alguns recadinhos, tá? Vou ficar com a câmera fechada também, para não atrapalhar a questão da conexão, ok? Então, agradecer a presença das professoras Viviane e da professora Arelis. Né, mais uma vez a professora Juliana teve um probleminha de conexão, mas em nome dela, né, do Grupo Felite, como a professora Cláudia já fez, agradecer a presença das professoras. Vou, então, retirá-las aqui da transmissão, mas muito obrigada, professoras.
Nós que agradecemos. Um abraço.
Obrigada, sucesso. Tchau.
Obrigada, gente. Tchau.
Então, a gente vai dar alguns recadinhos, pessoal, para que vocês possam aproveitar ao máximo, então, do nosso evento, tá? Então, quanto à lista de presença, ok? Nos eventos que são transmitidos ao vivo, a lista de presenças vai ser gerada automaticamente pela participação no chat, então coloquem sempre o nome completo de vocês, e também, para título de curiosidade, né, para a gente saber até onde o EPIC está chegando, coloquem também a cidade, o estado, a instituição da qual vocês fazem parte, e aí a lista de presenças é gerada automaticamente, então, pelo chat. Vocês também podem deixar as perguntas, tá bom? Conforme vocês forem pensando, de acordo com as falas que vocês ouvirem, deixem as perguntas, e aí lá no final a gente vai tentar responder de acordo com a demanda. Às vezes nós não conseguimos responder todas, mas tentaremos fazer o possível para contemplar todos os questionamentos que forem aparecendo. A gente queria pedir muito para todos vocês se inscreverem no nosso canal do YouTube, para acompanharem as nossas redes sociais. Estamos sempre postando as atividades do Grupo Felite, ok? Então, acompanhem lá. No Facebook, vocês vão encontrar EPIC-UEL e no Instagram, Felite CNPq. Agora, aqui no YouTube, o canal também é Felite CNPq. Então, vai lá, se inscreve no canal. Ativa as notificações das próximas transmissões ao vivo, e assim vocês não perdem nenhuma palestra, nenhuma mesa, que já está tudo programado. A gente também queria pedir para vocês, sempre que vocês postarem uma foto, tire uma foto com a caneca de vocês, postem nas redes sociais, marquem ou EPIC no Facebook, ou Felite no Instagram, para que a gente possa repostar também essas fotos e ter acesso, né, se vocês marcarem a hashtag EPIC em casa ou hashtag Felite CNPq, a gente consegue repostar e consegue pesquisar e achar todas essas fotos. Nós também vamos soltar hoje, pessoal, uma ação pelo Instagram e Facebook, na qual nós gostaríamos de conhecer como é que a história de vocês cruza com a nossa história. Então, se você tem uma história com o Felite ou com o evento, com o EPIC, conte pra gente, pode ser por comentário, pode ser num story que você grava um vídeo, se você se sentir à vontade, mas a gente gostaria muito de saber como é que você conheceu o EPIC, qual a sua experiência aqui, se você gosta, o que é que você gosta, e assim a gente vai conseguindo aprimorar, sem contar que nós estamos, por meio dessa ação, tentando resgatar o que a gente tinha no presencial, que é esse acolhimento, né? Então, quem participou dos outros EPICs sabe que a gente sempre pensou muito e cuidou muito para que todos fossem bem acolhidos na UEL, e hoje a gente tenta fazer isso nas mídias sociais. Lembrando mais uma vez, então, que o caderno de resumos e que a programação completa está lá no site, então está publicado em todas as redes sociais também. É só entrar lá no site e baixar o caderno de resumos, a programação tem todos os links. Vou chamar aqui de volta, então, a professora Juliana, ela vai dar uma palavrinha e a gente vai seguir.
Obrigada, Gabriele. Essas orientações são bem importantes, né, para o bom andamento do evento. Então, como a professora Viviane colocou, nós sentimos, né, Cláudia, que nós deveríamos fazer um evento pulverizado, para que a gente também não ficasse sobrecarregado. Sabemos desse momento que estamos vivendo, professores e professoras, muitos ainda em aula remota, e mesmo no ensino híbrido, o quanto tem sido cansativo, né? Márcia, nós não temos uma caneta do evento EPIC, mas você acabou de nos dar uma excelente ideia. Nós vamos dar um jeitinho nisso, viu? Muito
obrigada. Uma caneca, né? Igual essa da foto.
Seria
uma boa, hein?
Seria uma boa, gente. Vamos providenciar, Márcia. Nós também, acho que é importante, né, dizer nesse momento de abertura, de todas as iniciativas que nós temos feito. Então, o EPIC em Casa, para quem já acompanhou aí os nossos eventos desde o ano passado, a professora Viviane fez menção a uma das primeiras ações que nós fizemos logo que foi deflagrada a pandemia. Eu me lembro que naquele momento nós ficamos muito preocupadas com a questão das crianças, né? Como que elas ficariam em casa em março do ano passado, em que tudo estava tão incerto, e aí começamos uma iniciativa muito simples, né, muito de contar histórias para as crianças em inglês, e decidimos, então, deixar essas histórias gravadas no nosso canal do YouTube, e o retorno que nós tivemos foi muito bom, né, de que realmente as crianças assistiram à contação das histórias. Então, queremos convidar vocês a visitarem o nosso canal do YouTube, a olharem a contação de histórias que estão ainda lá gravadas. A questão do conversando em casa, que algumas pessoas também têm nos perguntado, nós suspendemos o conversando em casa um pouquinho, porque nós precisávamos nos dedicar totalmente à organização desse evento e também agora ao próprio evento. Então, assim que o EPIC e o 4º seminário de avaliação terminarem, nós retornaremos à programação do Conversando em Casa, né, Cláudia? Porque a gente sente que é um espaço de estudo, de trocas, e que as pessoas realmente querem participar, né?
Com certeza. Esse ano a gente teve o ciclo de palestras sobre bilinguismo e ensino bilíngue, né? Então a gente iniciou esse ano com essa iniciativa para a gente conversar um pouquinho sobre essas questões, que também foi muito interessante, porque a gente pensou no ensino de inglês, no ensino de outras línguas, numa perspectiva mais plurilíngue, aprendemos muito com essas conversas, e aí agora a gente veio para o EPIC, mas em breve a gente vai retomar. E eu queria falar também que foi muito boa essa iniciativa da Gabriele, de pedir para as pessoas se apresentarem, porque agora que eu consegui olhar o chat, gente, desculpa, né, porque é muita coisa aqui, a gente não dá conta, mas agora que eu comecei a olhar, e tô vendo muita gente aqui participando, e de vários locais, né, de São Paulo, de Vitória. Por favor, pessoal de Vitória tem que prestigiar, né, do Paraná, e o pessoal do Espírito Santo, não só de Vitória, né, pessoal do Paraná e de Londrina, do Piauí, muito bom, e tô vendo vários nomes conhecidos, então também muito bom poder ver vocês aqui, não tô vendo vocês, né, mas sei que vocês estão participando, fico muito feliz também. Obrigada por poderem colocar essas informações para a gente saber quem está acompanhando a gente, muito legal.
Isso mesmo, Cláudia. É importante também falar dos cursos, né, que nós temos ofertado. Nesse momento, nós temos um curso em andamento, é um curso em parceria com outras instituições de ensino. Temos, então, uma parceria com a Universidade Federal do Espírito Santo, representada pela professora Cláudia, a Universidade Estadual de Goiás. Nós temos a professora Helena, representando a Universidade Federal de Santa Maria, e agora a Universidade Federal de Pelotas, que a professora Helena acabou de assumir o concurso na Federal de Pelotas. Então, é um curso que foi iniciado em março, e que nós temos, ao longo dos módulos, tratado sobre as questões das possibilidades de um ensino multi e plurilíngue na perspectiva da Base Nacional Comum Curricular. Nós sabemos, né, contrariando aí aos nossos desejos, às nossas expectativas, né, anteriormente à promulgação e à publicação da base, o quanto nós esperávamos, né, Cláudia, de que esse documento, de alguma maneira, pudesse contemplar o ensino de línguas na educação infantil e no 1º ao 5º ano. E qual não foi a nossa surpresa quando a base foi publicada E mais uma vez, né, nós, então, vimos que nós continuávamos sem diretrizes para o ensino de línguas nessa faixa etária. Então, nós temos desenvolvido nesse curso uma perspectiva, entendendo que a base não nos orienta, mas que então nós podemos utilizar esse documento como um guia, né, um documento norteador, e esse curso, então, nós estamos iniciando o 6º módulo agora, com a professora Cláudia e com a professora Mariana Secato, que falarão um pouquinho da elaboração de materiais didáticos. Nós iniciamos o curso falando sobre a perspectiva de ensino plurilingüe na infância, educação linguística, o que nós temos entendido por educação linguística. Passamos por um módulo que falou sobre... a Fabiana está aqui falando do curso, né, que tem sido extremamente transformador. Nós ficamos muito felizes, Fabiana, com o seu feedback, né? Passamos, então, no 2º módulo, um módulo que tratou exclusivamente sobre as fases do desenvolvimento da criança. Depois, o 3º módulo, ele se dedicou às questões do ensino baseado em projeto, né? Como que esse ensino pode ser transdisciplinar, multidisciplinar. Foi um módulo ministrado pela professora Juliana Castro Brossi, que faz parte do grupo de pesquisa Felite, e pela professora Helena Selba, que também é do grupo. Depois, nós fomos para o módulo de avaliação, que foi ministrado pela professora Thais Balbini e a professora Bruna, que também... assim, foi maravilhoso, como a professora Viviane falou, nós ainda temos carência de pesquisas, e não só pesquisas, né, Cláudia, mas também de orientações e de práticas, como avaliar crianças tão pequenas aprendendo uma língua adicional. E nessa semana nós encerramos o módulo 5, que foi um módulo ministrado por mim, pela professora Gabriele Maggiolo e pela professora Araceli, de Maringá, que também é uma parceira nossa. Nós tratamos da contação de histórias e das possibilidades que o storytelling traz na organização curricular de um ensino, né, também pautado aí numa perspectiva de educação linguística plurilingue. E agora nós vamos iniciar o módulo com a professora Cláudia, né, Cláudia?
Sim, eu e a Mariana Secato, a gente já está planejando, tem muita coisa legal, a Mari é cheia de ideias. Aliás, esse pessoal do Felite, se precisar de ideia, o pessoal tem um monte aí, né? Então, a gente também está bastante animada, e a gente começa no início de outubro esse módulo sobre material didático. Vai ser muito bom também.
Isso. E depois o último módulo, que que nós chamamos de tópicos especiais, nós teremos uma surpresa, que acho que vocês vão gostar bastante sobre esse tópico especial, né? Estou vendo aqui no chat, as pessoas estão perguntando onde ter mais informações sobre esse curso. Marisabel, esse curso já iniciou em março, então agora não é possível, né, entrar agora no meio do curso, ele está praticamente terminando, mas nós temos a intenção de reofertá-lo o ano que vem, tá bem? Então, fiquem atentos e atentas às nossas redes sociais. Nós temos utilizado as redes sociais para divulgar as ações do Felite, porque nós sabemos que hoje em dia é por meio das redes sociais mesmo que a gente consegue atingir o maior número de pessoas possível. Então, a intenção de reofertar o curso o ano que vem, nós temos várias prefeituras participando, várias secretarias municipais de educação. Então, eu estou vendo aqui, como a Cláudia falou, pessoas de todo o Brasil, que delícia, gente. Muito obrigada. Obrigada, Juan Pablo, que bom, né? Ficamos muito felizes, muito legal. Ah, é verdade, preciso falar disso, né, Juan? Bem lembrado. Só dizer antes, né, que então nós temos várias secretarias de educação que já ofertam o ensino de línguas, ou aquelas que desejam. Opa, voltei? Então, se você está aqui nessa manhã, e você atua, às vezes dá uma desestabilizada aqui. Dá uma tremida.
Tem que ser com emoção, gente.
Gente, é tudo com emoção, vocês não sabem, essa madrugada foi tudo muito emocionante aqui nos bastidores, né? O pessoal não para, eu falei, meu Deus, nós não vamos dormir, mas é realmente assim, a ansiedade boa que a gente fala, né? Então, se você atua em algum município e quiser entrar em contato conosco, né, quiser que a gente desenvolva algum trabalho junto às secretarias municipais, quer seja formação de professores, desenvolvimento de material didático, entre em contato conosco, há essa possibilidade sim, tá bem? E o Juan Pablo nos lembrou de algo bem especial, que é uma especialização, não é um curso de extensão, é uma especialização na modalidade à distância. Ela é a segunda oferta, né, dessa especialização. A primeira turma se formou em 2019. É uma especialização de 24 meses. E é uma parceria da Universidade Estadual de Londrina com a Universidade Aberta do Brasil. Então, né, por conta dessa parceria e do financiamento do curso pela CAPES, essa especialização ela é totalmente gratuita, e até onde a gente sabe, né, é uma das únicas, tem uma especialização na Unemate sobre ensino de línguas para crianças, mas é uma especialização, ela é presencial o curso, né, mas nessa modalidade à distância, totalmente gratuito, até onde nós sabemos, é a única, a Ana Carolina foi da primeira turma, é verdade, Ana Carolina, e até onde nós sabemos é a única pós-graduação em nível de especialização à distância do Brasil. Então, como vocês podem ver, né, nós não paramos aqui na UEL e, enfim, né, estamos aqui para trocar experiências com vocês. Bem, acho que agora nós vamos fazer o intervalo de 10 minutinhos, né, para a gente se esticar um pouquinho, já que nós não estamos no presencial, seria aquele momentinho que a gente ia levantar, ia dar um abraço na amiga, né, Cláudia?
Um coffee break, né, pessoal? A saudade do coffee break, de um congresso.
Nem me fale. Então, nós vamos dar 10 minutinhos de intervalo para a gente correr, pegar um cafezinho, pegue a sua xícara, a sua água e logo nós voltamos. Até já!
E até.
Hello? Então, agora a gente vai fazer uma translanguaging aqui, pessoal. So, we are very, very happy to have here this morning for our opening ceremony, Professor Fiona Copland. Hello, Fiona.
Hello, how are you?
Hello. We are really delighted to have you here. I know that for you it's a Saturday night. I have already apologized for that, but I'll do it again in public. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
So we are very, very happy. I'd like to introduce you my friend, Claudia. She is the co-leader of the research group that we told you the other day. And we are very, very happy. We are online here, and we have many people saying hello, saying they are really excited to hear from you this morning. People are saying, what a wonderful beginning. Thanks, Fiona, for being with us. You can read their comments here, okay? So we are going to do the following. Claudia is going to introduce Professor Fiona, and then we are going to have her talk, her lecture, and we would like to ask you to please type your questions on the chat. It's a wonderful opportunity. You are going to see that Professor Fiona, she's the name to talk to us about, yes, you are, dear, to talk to us about English language teaching or foreign languages teaching to young learners. We have been reading her papers, her books, so we are very, very happy, okay? So please type your questions. This is your opportunity to talk to Fiona this morning. Claudia, please.
Hello, Fiona, welcome. Thank you very much for being here with us. It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you. And again, I'm sorry, it's a bad time for you, but we are very happy to have you here. And my job now is to introduce you, which is very difficult because it's not difficult. It's easy because you are already very well known for us. But I'm going to read quickly here some information about you, so those who do not know you can have the chance to have some information, and then we are going to start with your talk. So Fiona Copland is a professor of TESOL at the University of Stirling, Scotland, where she's also the Associate Dean Research in the Faculty of Social Sciences. Fiona's research interests include teacher education for TESOL, teaching English to young learners, and linguistic ethnography. She has published widely, including linguistic ethnography, collecting, analyzing, and presenting data, the Routledge Handbook of Teaching English to Young Learners, and young learner education, and materials development and course book and beyond. These books have some co-authors, co-organizers. Fiona is currently working on a British Council-funded project with colleagues in Bangladesh, Malawi, Mexico, and Uzbekistan, titled English as a School Subject, Learning Effective Practices from Low-Level Primary English Language Teachers. And today, Fiona is going to talk about challenges in teaching English to young learners and some responses. So we are very anxious to hear from you and to learn with you. So again, we ask everyone to type their questions, their comments, and at the end we hope we have some time to talk more about this. So thank you very much, Fiona, and the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Claudia. Nice to meet you, and thank you, Juliana, for inviting me to talk. Yes, and I must say that I'm a researcher rather than a teacher, but I'm always wanting to learn from teachers, which is what my recent projects have all been about. I was a teacher for many years, but I haven't been doing that much classroom teaching recently. I'm going to try and share some slides, so let's see how that goes. Can you see that? It seems to be flickering to me. Oh, it is flickering. I don't know why it's doing that. Ooh, horrible. Okay, stop sharing. Let's try again. Otherwise, maybe... that seems better to me. Okay, so hopefully you can see that now. I'll talk for about half an hour or so. If I'm talking too much, then please shut me up. And if you'd rather discuss, that's fine too. I'm going to talk about challenges in teaching English to young learners and some possible responses. And this is from research that I've done over the last 10 years or so with other colleagues, notably Sue Garton, Professor Sue Garton at Aston University, and other colleagues around the world. I work currently at the University of Stirling, which is in Scotland, and I'll show you a little bit about that, because I'm sure most of you have got no idea where Stirling is. So this is a map of Scotland here. Here's England at the bottom in white, but Scotland's at the top here. And Stirling is right kind of bang smack in the middle of Scotland. Why is it famous? It is quite famous in historical terms. So it's where the Battle of Bannockburn and battles around independence from England were fought, and you might have seen Mel Gibson playing some famous Scottish warriors in the films. It's where this show, I don't know if you know this show Outlander that's been on TV, it's all been filmed in or around Stirling, and in fact at Stirling University as well. It's the home of this guy here who's Andy Murray. I don't know if you know him. He was I still think he is playing tennis, but much less now. But he's won a number of tournaments. And the campus itself, where we work, is really rather beautiful. We have our own castle. So this is Airthree Castle on the campus, which is surrounded by a golf course. And this is the building in which I work, and that's the view. That thing here, that's Wallace's monument after William Wallace. And I work here, and my view is of William Wallace's monument. And in the other side of the building, you see the various lochs on the lakes on the campus. And also around this area, you can't see lots of hills. Here we go, behind here. So it's a very lovely place to work. And maybe one day you'd like to come and see us or study with us. We have a number of programs that we offer, from MSc online to MSc in face-to-face. And we also have a PhD in TESOL research, which is quite an innovative program, which is kind of a hybrid program with quite a lot of talk modules to give students a good background in research methods. And then the thesis, obviously. So, yeah, maybe one day one or two of you might come and work with us. That would be great. So today I'm going to talk about the challenges in teaching English to young learners. So I'm going to talk about the background to this. Then I'll identify the problems, or some of the problems, then some principles and suggested solutions, and what the teachers say about these things. And after that, I hope we can have a discussion to see if these problems and solutions are similar in contexts in which you work. And the background for all this research is, the first one is this project here, investigating global practices in teaching English to young learners, which you can get online. It's freely available, and it was written up in a TESOL quarterly article. You might also be interested in the ELT journal, a special issue that we did on this theme, and also the I'm going to be referring to the Routledge Handbook of Teaching English to Young Learners and what the chapter authors say in there. There's some really good stuff in that book. And also, I'm going to be referring to a project that is just hot off the press at the moment. We are just about going to publish the report. And this is an investigating global practices in teaching English to young learners 10 years on. So we repeated the project that we did 10 years ago. And so I'll be sharing some of the findings from the new project. And this is the first time I think I've spoken about those. So it is what's maybe quite interesting is that the challenges don't seem to have changed very much. I think that's unfortunate. Okay, so what about a bit around the background then? So there's been a global growth in teaching English to children. 15 years ago, there were far fewer primary school children learning English, and it was much more an activity that happened at secondary school, the post 11, 12-year-olds. But over the last 15 years, there has been a real way forward. I'm not sure if it's a way forward, but younger and younger and younger children have been learning English in state primary schools, often in private schools. Children might have been learning English from an early age, but it hasn't been so in state schools. But nowadays, this is very, very common. And Dick Johnstone has said that the global growth in children learning languages is possibly the biggest. Can you see these slides? I'm worried you can't see them.
Professor Fiona?
Yes.
People can see the slides, but it would be better if you enlarged them.
Right, I don't.
Yes.
It seems to be.
To make them like a presentation. They are not
Yes,
in the presentation mode.
But it's not working very well. I don't know why. I'll stop sharing and try again.
Okay.
It's very annoying. Right, so let me see if I can you see that better now?
It's just the same way it was before.
I'm not sure how to change that then, I'm afraid.
You should try pressing F5 button on your keyboard.
App what?
F5.
F5.
No, it's not working. But it's okay. No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We can follow up.
Okay. I was talking about this slide. So can you see the slide that says background?
Yeah.
That's fine then, because it's showing me two different versions at the moment, so it's quite difficult. Okay, so so I'll go back to this idea of young children learning languages as being a a new policy direction globally, and Johnstone called it perhaps the world's biggest policy development. So all of us working in this area, we're part of something truly global, and that, I think, means that we have to question it and worry about it and think whether it's really a good thing to be doing. Why is it that people want children to learn English in primary schools? Well, perhaps the biggest push factor has been, as you know, economic globalization. So the idea that the world is becoming a smaller place, that we have to work together, and we need a language to do that. And this is a common discourse. To be honest, I'm not sure whether there's a great deal of evidence to suggest that we do need a common language, but this is a common belief. And because of the economic closeness of the world and the need for a global lingua franca, parents understandably want their children to have the best opportunities, and therefore they want the children to be learning English, whether they're in a state school or a private school. They don't see that it's fair that children whose parents can afford to pay for English should be the ones that do that, and that their children don't get English language. So the parents are pushing for state education to offer English language to young children. And there's also this assumption that the earlier is better. So this is a very interesting one, because in fact, there is no evidence to suggest that learning English at school, in primary, in elementary school, is any better than starting in the secondary school. In fact, any gains that children make in primary are soon caught up by children in secondary. So linguistically anyway, there is no benefit from starting languages early in school. And there's lots of reasons for this. You know, for example, the children forget very easily. The children have very few hours of input. The classes are very large. So in fact, the teachers maybe struggle. They haven't been trained to be English language teachers, and so they struggle to teach English. So there's lots of reasons why early English language learning in schools is actually not that effective. But people think, oh, children are like sponges, they absorb English, and they don't really understand the research, I think, that shows that this isn't actually the case when you get to the school context. And with all this movement downwards to earlier and earlier English language learning, there's been policy changes around the world, and often these policies mean that the policy comes in before the planning has been done, and the policy cannot be enacted properly in many schools globally. And this causes problems then for a successful English language policy for children. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our first project in 2010. We were interested to find out what teachers around the world thought about early English language learning, and whether they thought it was what kind of activities they did in class and the challenges they faced. And so we set up a survey, and we set up some case studies around the world. So we went to South Korea, United Arab Emirates, Italy, Tanzania, and that's a picture you can see there of Tanzania. And we went to Colombia in Latin America as well. But the real success story of that project was that we had 5,000 teachers responding to our survey. And I'm going to share some of the findings from that survey now. One of the questions we asked was, what are the challenges that you face as an English language teacher of young learners? And we asked them to rank, to put into order the challenges that we presented. So here are the challenges on the slide that we had identified in 2010, coming from the research literature at the time. So in the research literature, it said that teachers need better access to technology. This is 10 years ago as well. Better access to other resources, course books, for example, more hours of English per week. The teachers said they needed training in new methodologies. Another problem, another challenge that was identified was that teachers' own levels of English were often thought to be too low to teach English effectively. Smaller classes were preferred. The literature said that fewer tests and examinations might be preferable because the teachers found it quite stressful to have to deal with tests and examinations. And there was also a lot of literature saying that, well, children should start really early, and that's a really important thing. So in our survey, we gave the teachers the opportunity to rank these, to put into order which ones they felt were the most challenging for them and which ones were the least challenging. So you might like to think, have a look yourself now and think, well, you know, what's the most challenging for me? And do I line up with the rest of the world? So in the survey, this is how teachers globally ranked these challenges. And you have to read it kind of from left to right. So in fact, the challenge that was most real for teachers was that they said they needed training in new language teaching methodologies, that they didn't feel themselves that they knew enough about how to teach English to children. So there's a lot going on in that statement, isn't there? Because, you know, teachers might know how to teach children, or teachers might know how to teach English, but it's a completely different thing to bring those two things together and have teachers who are trained to teach English to children. And many teachers around the world were not trained to teach English to children. And so they really, really wanted more ideas and more pedagogies for teaching young learners. And that was the biggest challenge. So this is the biggest challenge. Then came smaller classes. Teachers wanted smaller classes. Then they wanted more technology, better access. And then these are all very similar here. More hours of English per week. And then this is about resources, improving my own English, starting English at an earlier age. And this one is fewer tests and examinations. And for most teachers, that wasn't really such a problem. So the real problem was they didn't really feel they knew how to teach English properly. So if we compare that, so this is the first time I've shown this slide to anyone. So if we compare that to the data we had from the 2020 survey, this is what we can see. So in fact, the challenge, the major challenge is the same. So 10 years later, the major challenge is the same, and teachers still want training in new language teaching methodologies. That's the biggest challenge they face. The others have changed around a little bit. So this one has moved into second place, and this is better access to good resources, course books and such like, which wasn't so important 10 years ago. And then the next one is this one. They think the large classes are very difficult for them. And then these two are very similar, starting English at an earlier age and improvement in my own level of English. But interestingly, right at the bottom again are fewer tests and examinations. So teachers aren't really that bothered by the tests and the examinations. So this is a picture from one of our classrooms. This is a South Korean classroom. You can see how beautifully set up it is with all the technology and everything. So this is, I think South Korea has one of the most leading classroom setups in the world. Okay, so then we asked in our survey an open question. And we asked the question, what if you had to say yourself, what is the biggest challenge? What would you say is the biggest challenge for you? And we had thousands and thousands of open answer responses to this question. And we were very surprised by the answer, because we were expecting the teachers to say, you know, I need more training, or I need smaller classes, which had come out in the ranking question and which had been identified in the literature. But that's not what happened, actually. And the biggest challenge teachers wrote down in the open question was speaking. Teaching speaking was the challenge that most teachers identified as the most pressing. And the things that they said were, they found it difficult to develop interaction in the classroom. They found it hard to focus on pronunciation. They felt that children weren't comfortable speaking English. Children didn't want to communicate in English. And because often the classes were monolingual, that the children would go back to a shared language, a first or second language that they shared with other children, and use those languages instead. So getting children to speak English was the biggest challenge for teachers. The second challenge, I think, is more predictable. And that one was about children's behaviour and how teachers could discipline children. And I don't mean that in a kind of very negative way, but how you keep control of the classroom. And there were lots and lots and lots of comments about this as well. So we have things like the discipline, I think is very important. A lot of my children's classes have children who behave badly, distract the others, and disrupt the lessons. The classroom management is a problem. There's difficult groups. There are too many social issues. And children may see it as playtime. They don't take learning English seriously. And here's an Italian classroom. I don't know if you think this is that is out of control or not, but you know, some of the things we ask children to do in classes, you know, standing up or group work, it makes discipline very hard. So I'll be interested to hear later from you about whether you think that's true or not. The third challenge was differentiation. And by that, we mean anything that the teacher said about dealing with individual differences in the class. And one of the biggest individual differences teachers told us about was mixed level teaching. So trying to deal with children who are at different levels of English language learning. So some of them, for example, some children will go to private class after school and their English will develop well. Maybe some children have input from parents or carers in English, while other children are the only English input they are getting is in the classroom. And so this creates a different strata of language level for teachers to deal with. And teachers found this a real problem. So some comments there. And there was also people that spoke about special needs and teachers who spoke about working with children with learning difficulties and how they were expected to try and support them in these large classes. So that was the third challenge. The fourth challenge was motivation, trying to motivate children to learn. And again, I think we were quite surprised at this because in the literature, it seems to be to us that, young children, they're very motivated to learn. They love English. They really want to learn English. And, they're like sponges. They pick it up easily and all those kinds of positive comments. But the teachers in the survey told us different things. So, trying to get everybody to focus at the same time was a challenge. Some teachers put this challenge in a wider context and said, well, one of the problems is that the community doesn't value English. And if the community doesn't value English, how can I persuade the children to learn English? The children would rather be doing different things. They don't want to learn English. So there were lots and lots of quotes again from the teachers about the challenge of motivating children. And this was linked in some cases to class size, which was the fifth challenge. It's quite interesting, isn't it? What is a big classroom? But a lot of teachers were saying, well, if you've got 40 or 50 children in the class, it's far too many. You can't teach language in that environment. And that, if you're in a school with 20, that would be a lot better. And the sixth challenge, which I'm not going to spend much time on today, was about teaching grammar. So the teachers said that teaching grammar was very, very hard for them. Okay, so in our analysis of the new data, the 2020 data, we have found very similar things on a preliminary analysis. So we haven't done the analysis fully yet. That should be done in the next few weeks. But the things that we found are teachers are still complaining, rightly probably, about large classes. They're still challenged by classroom management and discipline. They still find it difficult to motivate students. I don't think there's quite as many comments around teaching speaking, but it's still there. And teachers are talking about their own level of English not being good enough to teach. And I think this one is very, very interesting and one that we are investigating in our new project. How much English does a teacher actually need to teach English? And I'll come back to this in a moment. Now, in Brazil, in your lovely country, which I have visited once and had a lovely time, we didn't have many people answering our survey. So I'm going to put the survey details up and I will share later with Juliana. But if anybody in the talk today would like to complete the survey, that would be great. And it would help us to understand the situation and the context in Brazil a little bit more. So I shall ask Juliana, like I said, to share that after the talk. So let's quickly move on to some solutions. And the solutions have come from other researchers, other teachers, what teachers have told us and what teachers have shared with us. So what about reluctance to speak? How can we deal with that problem? So here are a few ideas. excuse me. We think that one of the reasons that children might be afraid or reluctant to speak is the focus in many places on a target language class. So using English for everything. And we think that, in fact, it would be less stressful on teachers and students if teachers and students were both allowed to be more relaxed about the target-only class. Children in primary have very little English at their disposal, so they can't make the meanings that they want to make. And yet they're still children and still have to be encouraged to develop, to work in a class and all those other kinds of skills. So I think maybe taking the focus off target language only and saying, yes, Portuguese is fine. We're going to, you know, if you want to make sentences in Portuguese and English, that's fine. That would take a lot of stress off and maybe encourage a bit more English language use. Young learners, we think from our studies, need to play. And they don't always do very well in formal classrooms, learning English in a formal way. So finding opportunities for children to learn English in a playful way is important. Older learners, we think, should be given the opportunity to prepare to speak rather than just be expected to speak. So if they plan, if they feel confident in what they're going to say, then it's more likely that they will speak. And we also think it's important for teachers to model the successful bilingual. You know, it's amazing how many people around the world speak English to me. I'm constantly amazed by it. And yet when we get into a classroom, quite often, what we do is we only speak English. And we don't show children this skill that we have of being a bilingual. And we think, again, if we showed children more what a successful bilingual looked like, then maybe children would be more motivated to speak and try out their English. So this is an activity where children are playing. What they're actually doing here is, it's in Portugal, in fact, and the children have been doing some work with a big storybook. And then they have a play corner, an English play corner, and they put the storybook and the flashcards from the lesson into English play corner. And then these children are playing. They're kind of, the young boy is being the teacher and the young girl is being the student, and they're mimicking what they've heard in the lesson. And so they are still practicing English, but in a very playful way. I'll skip over that one. This activity is from a book that Sue and I put together called Crazy Animals and Other Activities for Teaching English to Young Learners, which is also a free resource on the British Council website. And this activity here is called Global Preparations. This came in from Argentina. And this was an activity helping teachers to do this thing about letting students prepare to speak rather than just expecting them to speak in the classroom. So if you're interested in that, you can go and find out about that. The next challenge was discipline. And we think that it's a really difficult thing, actually, to have good classroom management, especially trying to teach a language. But as Zane says, classroom management positively correlates with reduced disruptive behaviour, higher student participation, and greater learning satisfaction. So what can we do? Well, lots of things, and I'm sure you're all doing these things anyway. But things like, using Portuguese to tell students what to do so everything can start quickly and smoothly. Not getting engaged in long interactions with particular students, because that means everybody else is going off task. Not bringing attention to negative behaviour, but bringing attention to positive behaviour. Using cues and cards to replace shouting or trying to get children's attention. Having classroom rules or those kinds of things. And then just being punctual and fair, prepared, consistent. So all things that we all know we should do, but actually in the classroom are quite difficult to do. And here are some ideas for having different kinds of signs, you know, shh, be quiet, stop. If you have these signs, I've seen this in the United Arab Emirates, with a teacher had these signs around the board, and when he wanted the children to stop, he had the stop sign. And if you wanted the children, they also had this sleep time for the younger children. They put their hands on their heads, just brought everything down. They'd have the sleep sign. So you don't need to use these kinds of signs. You could use signs from the whole, from the country that kids were familiar with. Another activity is the hat activity, where children wear a hat depending on what kind of activity it is, so they know what it is they're supposed to be doing. Principle 3 is about diversity and responding and recognizing differentiation. I'm going to speed up a bit and don't want to take up all your time. So I think modern classrooms are very different to the classrooms in the old days, maybe when I was at school. You know, they're intercultural, multilingual, multi-ethnic, mixed gender, and children might have spiky profiles in English, good at one thing, not so good at other things, preferred approaches to learning, and what's recently been called different funds of knowledge, things that they're bringing to the classroom. So this means we have to address differentiation and think about how we treat each individual student. And I always feel a bit sorry for teachers at this point, because I think if teachers already have so much they have to do, they have to plan the lesson, they have to teach the lesson, they have to keep their English up, all these different things. And now researchers are telling them to address differentiation. So I think it's something that is great if you have time, but certainly understand that it might not always be possible. So let student choice, that can be a really good way to engage children and address individual needs, changing groupings, providing opportunities for children to shine. So some are good at speaking, some are good at writing, some are good at singing, whatever it is. I think this is a very important one. Rather than just explaining, modelling, that will often help children to understand what it is they have to do. And using pictures and visual aids has been shown to aid all children, not just children who are struggling. So it's kind of that universal design idea. And then we'll move on to motivation. And I think this is quite interesting, that in general, motivation declines as students move through the primary school years. So children who are in the early years are more likely to be enthusiastic and interested in English than those who are, 11 or 12 years old. And that also happens, goes into the secondary school stage as well. If children have already had a diet of English in the primary school, they might not be quite as motivated to learn English when they get to the secondary school. Now, parental involvement seems to be a great big part of doing all kinds of things, motivating children, disciplining children, encouraging children. So if that is something that can be done in your context, then that's something that a lot of researchers are now encouraging parents and children to do, and teachers to do. And I think it's really important with young children to realize how important you, the teacher, is. The teachers are incredibly important to motivate learners. I remember this from school. The teachers that I liked, I worked hard. I was happy to do what they asked me to do. And the ones I didn't like, I was sulky and not very nice. So your approach matters, I think, at the end of the day. Sometimes it's not so much what you do as how you do it. Class size. I think this is a culturally determined issue. So here are 3 classrooms. This is in South Korea, this is in Tanzania, and this is in the United Arab Emirates. So this class has got about 50 children, this class has got about 30 children, and this class has got 17 children. All these teachers think the classes are too big. So wherever you are, you think the classroom, there's too many kids in the classroom. So interestingly, in African countries where there are very, very large classrooms and classes, teachers were less likely to say that large classes were a problem, even though they were in the center of large class world, if you like. So what can you do about large classes? Routines are very important. Using shortcuts, such as the clapping rhythms and the signs. Using the divide and rule principle. So you have responsible children being class captains or group captains, although I think it's very important to share out those roles. Not to get caught up in one-to-one interactions, teach the class, and be kind to yourself as a teacher of large classes. It's not easy. You can't actually achieve very much in a 40-minute class with 40 children learning English. So being kinder to ourselves about what is possible, I think, is quite important. I'm coming to the end now. So what do teachers find useful themselves? Well, these are the kinds of things that they told us in the survey that they like to do in the classes. And I'm sure it's similar things to things that you would like to do. So songs, rhymes, chants, those kinds of things, very popular with children. But also, and this goes against, I think, where a lot of the methodology practitioners, what they're telling us. So I think methodology people tell us, oh, you need to do pair and group work and they need to sit round tables and all this kind of thing, which is great if you can do that. But in fact, for most teachers, what they're doing is whole class teaching. So this is the next challenge, I think. How can we do whole class teaching better? And this is something we're researching at the moment. Technology has been found to be very useful in all kinds of ways. Games, while drama and acting are not so popular in primary schools generally, role play is, and teachers generally like that. Stories is a very interesting one because we expected to see in our survey lots and lots of teachers doing stories, telling stories, using picture books, and so on. But in the survey, storytelling isn't that popular. And there's lots of reasons for that, I think, but it would be interesting to find out if it's popular in Brazil and the reasons if it is or if it's not. Of course, CLIL, content and language integrated learning, is getting more and more popular. And so are international projects where you link up with classrooms around the world. And if you wanted to know more about that, you could go to this website, the Hands Up Project, and find out how Nick Bilborough and his team link classrooms around the world to be mutually beneficial. And the teachers in these countries do these things: short activities, play elements, group work, and rewards. I think rewards is an interesting one, but very popular in Italy and very, very popular in South Korea. using a translanguaging pedagogy where you draw on all the languages available to you to teach the class, and the children draw on their languages as well to learn. Lots of repetition. The stop signs, that was a big thing in the United Arab Emirates. Using teaching assistants, if that's possible, that can be very effective. And team teaching, often with what's been called native English speaking teachers, is very popular, particularly in the Far East. So I'm coming to the end now. I'd like to thank you for listening, obviously, and for Juliana for inviting me. And a lot of this information has come from the Routledge Handbook of Teaching English to Young Learners. So I'd like to thank the authors of the chapters. One last picture of Stirling in the autumn. And these two publications you might find useful if you're interested in this topic. So thank you, and I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you so much, Fiona. We were here delighted to hear from you, right, Claudia?
Yes.
Especially because our research group, I think I have already mentioned to you before, we have been studying one of the books you showed us today, and it has been amazing. So we have some questions here. I think we would like to open to the questions.
Yes, please.
Yes. Thank you very much, Professor Fiona. It was amazing to listen to you. And it's very interesting to see how the challenges that you showed, that are challenges in the world, we face here in Brazil. So, and I'm glad that you showed some solutions too. Yes, it's nice to help us, but it's very important for us to focus on these problems and to reflect on this. So your talk was very, very, very good for us to keep doing that, to keep researching. So we have some questions here. I hope we have time to talk about them.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Maybe we can begin with Priscilla's and Juliana's questions because they are pretty much similar. So Priscilla is saying, do you think that the behavior, when you were talking about the children's behavior as a challenge, so do you think the behavior is related to the fact that kids usually learn another language because their parents want them to? It is because they don't know the reason, they don't see a reason to learn another language. And here in Brazil, and I guess in the other context that you showed, we can see that parents and the society in general, they consider that teaching English and learning English is for the future. So we see many parents of 3-year-old children or 4-year-old children thinking that, oh, I want my child to learn English because it's going to be good for their future. But they are 3, you know? So maybe this is what Priscilla is relating here. And Juliana's question is, do you think there's, I think it was the other one, Gabi. I think it was before Priscilla's question. Yeah, this one. So is there a relation between bad behavior and second language methodology? So
yes.
the idea of this behavior related to what children expect, what parents expect, and teachers' methodologies. So if you could talk a little bit about this.
I think they're really good questions, and I'm not sure I have the answers, but I have some observations, and I'll share those. I think, you know, it's very difficult to persuade or tell a 3 or 4 or 5 or even 6, 7 or 8. Perhaps when you get to 8, it's easier. Year-old child, why they should be learning English. Because children, you know, cognitively can't imagine so far in the future or why that would be useful to them. So for those reasons, I think it is very difficult, and it puts a lot of pressure on the teacher, because the teacher has to make the class motivating in itself, because the children don't have motivation outside the, you know, they don't know why they're doing this. So the teacher has to do all the motivating for them, make them want to do those activities. So I think that is difficult. I think if parents are speaking to children and saying, well, it's going to be important, please do it for me, maybe they will they'll go along to the class, and if the class is fun and enjoyable, maybe they will learn something. But I think there's a big problem with parents expecting too much from classes. What children, and it goes back to the, is earlier better question, because children forget things very easily. They don't generally have lots and lots of input in English. So they only make very small steps, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, maybe. So what's actually achievable is perhaps not that much. So what is the point, really? And I think the only point can be if the children enjoy it, they start hearing English, they think they get used to English, it doesn't become such a strange thing to them, then maybe that's worth it. I'm not convinced, but maybe. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting one. And related to the second language methodology, I think this is a really interesting question, because most of the pedagogy and the approaches we use with children come from adult classrooms. So they come from a communicative language teaching approach, which has been shown to work well in small classes with very motivated adult learners who often are paying quite a lot of money. So they're trying to get the most out of it. And because English has been introduced, very quickly at lower and lower levels, there hasn't been time to develop a pedagogy for teaching children English. And so what tends to happen is we bring in the pedagogies from adult learners, pair work, group work, and all these kinds of things. As soon as you do that, you lose control often. Well, not always, but quite often you lose control of the class. And you, as the teacher, might be quite happy with the children, being loud and doing group and pair work and whatever. But, when I worked in Hong Kong, the teacher next door wasn't very happy. And the teacher downstairs wasn't very happy either, because all they could hear was bang, 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 like this. And so, those kinds of methodologies might not be as appropriate and can lead to either behavior that you as the teacher don't like, or behavior that other people find difficult to cope with. So I think it's our job, and what we need to do going forward is find ways, activities and approaches for teaching children that are context appropriate. And by context, I mean not just that they're children, but they're children in a school. And that has a lot of its own barriers and issues. So the project we're working on at the moment is looking at effective practices from low-level English language teachers around the world. What do? Often it is whole class teaching. So what does good whole class teaching look like for teaching English to children?
Very nice. Thank you very much, Fiona. Amazing comments. And it's very interesting to see, again, how things are very similar to our context here in Brazil, right? Because sometimes we feel we are isolated, and mainly because when we think about teaching English to children, it's like we have one teacher at the school, we have one teacher in one specific context, and we feel it's very, very small. But it's like we are sharing the same challenges and the same reflections all over the world, right?
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I think we can move on to Mariana's question. Gabi, Mariana, yes. So can you comment on how these challenges, speaking and class management, indicate a certain concept, idea about learning and teaching language? And this question is very interesting. Thank you, Mariana, because again, we face this in Brazil, and it's not something specifically related to children, because speaking another language is a challenge for everyone. We find this in our adult lessons. If we have a shared language, we go back to our shared language. And I think what Mariana is putting here is that we need to consider the perspective, the concept, the view of language that we have, and also the context. right? As you were saying, and I loved one part of your talk that you said, we need to be kind to ourselves and to know what we can do, right? Because some teachers of public schools, they have one class of 40 minutes in one class per week of 40 minutes, and they cannot compare themselves to bilingual schools that have classes during the entire day in English. So I was very happy to listen to that. Yes. And okay, I'll let you talk now.
Okay. Yes, I think, what so the speaking and class management issues are around because we are putting more of an emphasis on communicative aspects, like I said before, so speaking and listening. And they're noisy activities, aren't they? You can't do that quietly. So, if you are teaching geography or history, for example, you don't need to have that level of interaction that you would if you're trying to get children to pronounce certain words or say certain sentences and that kind of thing. So I think it is about how we think about language teaching, especially in the early years and primary, which is orally based. So, and I think that's a difficult one, because when do you start introducing children to reading and writing in English? There's been a lot of, there's a lot of debate about this, whether children should be learning reading and writing English at the same time as they're still developing literacy in their first languages. So, I think that is a difficult one, but it's very difficult to focus on reading and writing when you can't do that. So you have to focus on listening and speaking. And so, I think that becomes quite a challenge. But it is about what we are focusing on in the classroom. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yes, you did.
Of course, reading and writing are very easy to test. Speaking and listening are much more difficult to test. So that's why later on, as you go through schools, you get less and less speaking and listening and more reading and writing, because you can, right. You can make sure that you can give somebody a percentage point based on that.
Yeah, and something that we see here in Brazil is that if you have this idea that language is a system and that you really need to master all the rules of the system, all the parts of the system, then this is the kind of practice that you're going to emphasize in your classes. And then maybe this idea of, my kids are not learning, but what are you teaching them, right? So maybe you are teaching so many grammar rules that they don't need at this time. So what is this kind of language that you're teaching your children?
Yeah,
right?
And I think the grammar rules thing is very interesting. At what age are children really able to understand grammar rules? And I think actually there's been some really interesting work at the University of York with Emma Marsden, and she's been in primary schools in England where children are learning German as a foreign language. And the children, actually, they're 9 years old, are able to start thinking about grammar and how grammar works. But, younger children are not, they're meaning focused. They're children. They're focused on meaning. And so, making activities that are meaning focused, I think, are probably the easiest way to motivate them.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Fiona. And I think we have time for another question. Juliana's question about teacher education, because I think it also summarizes what other people were commenting here on the chat. So Juliana says, do you think there's proper teacher education for preparing them to cope with all heterogeneous contexts, more autonomous and aware of the world's issues?
Yeah, very interesting. Again, when you go around the world and look at what people are doing, some countries have very, very, very complex and difficult. It's very difficult to become an English language teacher. I mean, in other countries, you basically leave school and you can be an English language teacher. So it's far, far less pressure to learn. But also, even in those contexts where it's a very long process, maybe 5 years, it's difficult because often what people are learning is about literature, or is about grammar, theory of grammar, or about theoretical aspects. It's not actually about the practical aspects of learning. And so, I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think it has to be appropriate to the country, the context. But I also think that it has to be fit for purpose. So this is going back to people like Kumaravadivelu, who talks about, pedagogy that's particular and practical and fits the context. I think that's what the teacher training should be doing. Teach about what it's like to be a child, teach about, what's possible in large classes, teach about those things, and don't worry so much about all the theoretical stuff that might not actually be that relevant to the classroom. I think your question here as well is interesting about the world issues. I mean, that's become quite a big thing, hasn't it, in English language teaching, about the idea that the content of what we teach could be much more fixed to global issues, and using that as the kind of curriculum for learning English. And I think there might be some benefits to that if it gives, today, sort of going into class and say, right, today class is the present perfect continuous. Don't we all love it? Right, this is how you use it. This is how you form it, da-di-da-di-da. That might not be as interesting to children as what's happening in the world today, okay? And using going with the content of, water or forestation and deforestation as topics around which you build the curriculum. So I do have some sympathy for that. I think the battle is actually with publishers. If you look at course books today compared to course books 10 and 20 years ago, I've got a student doing this now. They're very similar. They might be glossy and shiny and have nice pictures and things, but the content is often very similar. And what they want children to learn is, grammar and vocabulary. So, I think that's a battle we need to do with, or have with the publishers to make the books better.
Yes, thank you, Fiona.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I was just here, Fiona, wondering about what you've just said related to books content. So again, I think that we have the matter of what parents expect children to learn. So somehow when you sell a course book, you have to show that they will actually learn something. And I was just talking to Claudia, I think it was yesterday, about that. It was interesting when you mentioned that the methods that we see people using with children, they came from methods from the past used with adults. So again, we see this. I totally agree with you when you say this about the content that we find in course books. But again, I think that it's pretty much related to what parents and families, because this is a way of measuring, if we can say that, the learning. I don't know if you...
Yeah, to be honest, I think that's fair enough in a way, especially in private education when, parents are paying for it, they want to know what they're getting. And also it means that if you've got a course book, the child can go home with the course book, and at an appropriate time, the parent can sit down and say, well, tell me what you did today. What does this word mean? And all those. So they can use the course book to reinforce. And it does help people to see progress. So I think I'm not against course books at all, actually. And I think they can really help teachers organize lessons. And, you know, sometimes we just don't have time, do we? So it's like page 49, off we go. And that's okay too. But I think it's what's in the course books that we need to worry about and have be, you know, but good luck with that one, because I know quite a lot of course book writers, and they all, even, you know, the most amazing course book writers struggle to get things past the editors at that level in the publishers. You know, they just don't want this, they don't want that. They want it to be like it was before with a few changes.
Yes, and that's why we need to continue to defend teacher education, right? Because we cannot change some of these ideas of books because we have an industry behind it. And there is a Brazilian author who talks about the plastic world of textbooks, because it looks like it's a plastic world. Not just, he's not talking about children, but we can relate it to children. But when we have teacher educated to make their choices, maybe they can look at this content and do something else, right?
Yeah.
As we defend.
Oh, that's a great, I'm going to take that one away, the plastic course book. I like that.
Yeah. Do we have more? I think we are at the end of our talk here. Do we have more questions?
I just think that people are thanking and saying how lovely this morning was, this evening actually for you, right, Fiona?
Well, afternoon actually.
Afternoon, okay.
Okay, and Jackie, he's saying, right, that we need to understand our young students' individualities and how they learn. This is true. We have been trying to do this here in Brazil, especially, I mean, in Brazil, it's a huge country, right, Claudia? In our contexts where we can, the places we can reach, because we really believe this is important, this is part of our job. And one more thing, Fiona, I'm very interested to know the findings about the usage of storybooks, because funnily enough, we are carrying out a research about that right now, trying to understand a bit more, because here in Brazil, we can see that it is quite common, people using storytelling to teach English to young learners, but we are carrying out a research to get to know a bit more what kind of techniques they use, what they do after telling the story. So it's not just telling the story, what can you do, how you do. So we promise to share the findings with you.
Please do. I mean, the research that we've been working on shows that, I mean, some teachers do stories, of course, you know, and I think we can drill down a little bit of whether that's reading stories, telling stories, whatever it is. But so many teachers don't. It's just not part of a school culture to tell a story. So, you know, if you are in an educational environment where storytelling is generally approved of, so in the UK, you know, basically that's what kids do for quite a lot of the time, is tell and learn and retell stories, and that's how we think kids develop literacy skills. It's not the same everywhere. So quite a lot of the Far East, it's just not the same. And China, for example, telling a story is just not seen as very serious. It's not proper education. So yeah, I think it really depends I think teachers tell stories or do stories depending on how much it's valued already by the culture.
That's what I was saying here. I think it's pretty much related to culture, right?
Yeah.
So
it goes back to that other point about, you know, global issues, and, you know, that they also can come up through stories, can't they? And you know, if you've got that kind of narrative strand in your culture, it's a natural way for children to learn.
Yeah, for sure. We totally agree with that. So thank you so much, Fiona, for this wonderful time together. It was really
lovely.
People
I'm
are
sorry
here.
about the slides not being very big, but
Don't worry,
No
don't
problem.
worry. No problem. It was wonderful. We were really, eager to hear from you. And we would like just to remind people that this talk will be, it's being recorded, so it will be available. People are here a bit worried that they couldn't see the slides. I couldn't. So don't worry, that the talk will be recorded. Okay. So thank you so much, Fiona. In 2 hours, it's 11 a.m. here for us in Brazil. At 1 p.m., we're going to have another talk with a colleague from Finland, Kaisa Hall. Yeah, and she's going to, I think that she told me she would be here. I don't know if she's here. So Kaisa, if you're here, please say hello in the chat. But anyways, Fiona, feel free to join us if you want to join us later. She's going to talk about teachers' education, some findings that she would like to share with us. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It's been lovely to meet you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Thank you.
And fill in the questionnaire if you like. That would be great.
Yes, send it to me, please.
I will.
Okay, email me, please.
I will. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bom, nós queremos, então, acho que foi muito bom, né, Cláudia?
Foi maravilhoso. Muito bom.
É incrível como que quando a gente, assim, às vezes a gente ouve outras pessoas falando, e eu não sei você, Cláudia, não sei as pessoas que estão aqui conosco, mas a sensação que eu tenho é assim, gente, nós não estamos loucas. Nós não estamos malucas. A gente já vem falando isso há algum tempo. É muito gostoso, né? Porque a gente sente assim um quentinho no coração, né? Não, estamos no caminho certo, né?
Wow, Kaisa is there. Very
hello, Kaisa! So good to know that you are here, dear. We are waiting for you in 2 hours. People are waiting to get to know you. So, Claudia and people, thank you very much for today. We are coming back at 1 p.m. with the presentation of Kaisa Hall. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Tchau, gente. Muito obrigada.
Tchau, gente. Obrigada.